So hi everyone, I'm Kyle. I started iFixit and I've been involved in a lot of the right to repair advocacy work around the world. We're very excited to do this. This is kind of a hybrid event where we have a whole bunch of folks in a room in Lincoln and a whole bunch of folks online. We've got cotton farmers from Texas and a bunch of folks from Omaha. And a lot of people are very interested in this issue. To kind of tee things off, Senator Jerry Johnson is here, and I thought I would let him kind of kick things off and tell us a little bit about what's been going on in Nebraska and how things are going. There are 4 right to repair bills pending in different U.S. states, as well as some copyright work that's happening at the federal level. So there's a lot of action around this, and I'm excited to have Senator Johnson share with us how things are happening in Nebraska and what his perspective is on it.
Thank you. I'm Senator Jerry Johnson from the Nebraska Unicameral. First of all, welcome to the Nebraska Capitol. We're in one of the hearing rooms that are used during our session. I am chair of the Ag Committee for the Nebraska Unicameral. So I'm here not as necessarily a sponsor, but a liaison to be present. And this bill, this resolution, LR 598, is a result of action not taken last year during the session, and the resolution has been referenced for a study to the Ag Committee. So I will be involved in that as it moves forward. The LB 1072 was introduced last year in the Nebraska legislature. It was a short session, a 60-day session. A lot of bills did not get heard, just a time commitment. Some bills got delayed. Some bills, if it didn't have a priority designation, it probably did not get to the floor and did not get heard. And that's kind of what happened with the situation with LB 1072. So with that, and the way it was stalled, partly because of procedure, we have the resolution for the study this summer, and we'll see where your group wants to take it, and I'll have the staff from the Ag Committee, my office, would be available to help with some research and doing some work on it if necessary. So that's kind of my position today, hosting this meeting, and I will step aside. I'll be in the audience, and we'll turn it over to the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So there has been a long history of issues that have hit a lot of different industries, everything from electronics repair over to folks in the agricultural community. And I thought maybe to give a bit of the history of why we're here, Gordon Byron is the director of repair.org, and maybe she can give us a little bit of the history of what has got us here and why is this an issue that needs legislative action.
Yes, hi everybody. I've had the pleasure of being out to Lincoln and sat in one of those hearing rooms and been involved with LB 1072, and I'm really pleased that it's going to a study because that's going to help, I think, iron out a lot of the issues that were kind of left hanging. We have been able to put bills into 4 different states. New York is considering a measure. It's the session ends at the end of this week. We've got sponsors in the leadership in both the Senate and the Assembly, but as you can imagine, we're really kind of running out of time. I would have loved to have said they moved on it today, but who knows? It's one of those things that we can no longer control. We've done the best we can do to get a lot of constituents involved, and that has, including the New York Farm Bureau, by the way, which has had a very significant impact on the acceptance of the contract. In New York. There's also a bill still pending in Massachusetts, modeled after their original bill, which was the automotive right to repair bill that basically set this whole thing up. That became the source of a national agreement. The commercial truck industry followed suit, and so now we have the situation where you can repair an over-the-road truck that has exactly the same equipment on the inside as an off-road truck that you can't repair because it's not labeled a commercial truck. So that's part of the reason that this makes a lot of sense for agriculture, because there's just a huge commonality in the equipment that's being used. Another bill that we moved on didn't get, again, a short session issue in Minnesota. It was related to a e-waste recycling process that the process did go through, but our amendment didn't move it was approved in committee, which is a huge step forward. And then, of course, we have your bill, which we just heard the history of. So if anybody has any questions about what's going on, oh, and Kyle did ask the question, why states? And that's because states
and Gay, if you could give us a bit of an idea of what the bill would cover and what we're trying to accomplish.
Oh, the bill would cover requiring manufacturers to be essentially just cooperate with the idea that the owner can repair their own equipment, or that an independent technician could be hired. So the requirement's actually pretty basic. It's the kind of stuff you used to get when you bought a piece of equipment. So it says you will provide service documentation, diagnostics, tools if there's any specialty tools, the firmware that comes with the machine and the updates that go with it, and have some kind of parts desk access for service parts, provided those parts are still available.
Fantastic. Thanks for the overview. And I think maybe we'll go back to Lincoln. And who's up next to kind of share your perspective?
My name is Kenny Roefelson with Abilene Machine Incorporated. What we do is we sell aftermarket and replacement ag parts for tractors, combines, really kind of everything. So this bill kind of hits close to home. We'd like to get into the 21st century and start offering some software and firmware solutions for our customers. What kind of got us into this is we had been trying to develop a diagnostic tooling for people, farmers, repair shops alike, either one. We came across our lawyers, as always, told us, hey, you need to be careful. I don't think legally you can sell these diagnostic machines, which we kind of found we thought was kind of ridiculous. So we started digging into it. Luckily, Kevin and Gay contacted us, and here we are. So obviously, I'm a huge proponent towards LB 1072. I think, not only from a business standpoint, but it's going to help individual costs go down. It's going to help farmers' costs go down. I don't know if anybody really reads into ag right now, but ag is not making very much money at the moment. The average income revenue for a Kansas farmer last year was $2,500. To call a technician out and diagnose your tractor, on average, you're probably looking at about a $1,200, $1,500 charge. So you start putting all these things into perspective, it really makes a difference, and that's why this is such a big deal. So that's kind of my introduction, and I think, Abilene Machines, part of it is, it's not that we necessarily want to, us personally, we don't want to create new software out of this stuff. All we want to do is be able to sell our customers diagnostic tooling so that they can fix tractors and combines. I mean, I think it's really simple, and I think if you start looking at the legality point of things, you'll find out that it's completely sane to want to do this on our part. It's legal, it's right, and it makes a lot of sense. But Gay did give me a lot of questions here. I want to say that first off. I don't know if I'm going to go through all this, Gay.
Well, and Kenny, maybe if you could start us off by give us an example of a customer that you've had that's had a problem or a specific repair that they haven't been able to do because they haven't had access to the diagnostics. Great
question. Great example would be, matter of fact, I'm going to give my friend, he's also a customer. He has an 8430R, I believe, which is a newer John Deere tractor. Long story straight, he was planting corn this season. The software's threw a code in his emission systems, which shut the tractor down in the middle of the field. If you know, Kansas has been having some storms lately, and when you get a week to plant, you got to plant. There's no putting it off till tomorrow. So long story straight, his tractor shut down in the middle of the field. He can't plant. He's wasting money. Harvest is coming the week later, so he can't plant next week. So that's going to cost him money, period. I mean, that's just, there's another way to say it. And that's a great example, because in that case, he could have bought a diagnostic tooling machine from us a long time ago. He could have went out, figured out what was wrong with the computer, maybe a filter needed changes, who knows. He could have fixed the problem, flashed the computer to turn back to normal, and he could have been on his way within maybe a couple hours. But instead, he had to wait for the dealer to come out with a diagnostic tool, a special technician who's trained. And I don't know if you know, there's not a whole lot of these technicians just floating around for dealers. typically, or you'll have one a region or two, maybe five, depending on how big the region is. But what happened to him is he had to wait about 3 or 4 days before someone could come out and fix that tractor for him. That costed him a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of time. And I just, their argument is we're the ones that can do it. And I just don't see how they can't even service their own customers. So they need to start relinquishing some of those rights to third parties and individual dealers and even people who can sell the tooling like us. So I think that's probably the best example I got, Kyle.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. So I'm going to take things over to Jordan. Jordan is remote from Salt Lake City. He's at the National Farm Bureau staff meeting. Is that right, Jordan?
It's a conglomeration of public affairs people and public relations folks, and just kind of a staff thing to learn more about issues and communications and all that type of stuff.
Fantastic. So Jordan, I know that in individual states, so like in New York, Farm Bureau has decided to get involved and support right to repair efforts. Can you give me a feel of where things are at in Nebraska and what your kind of stance is on right to repair right now?
Absolutely. So for those you don't know, the Nebraska Farm Bureau is an organization that's a part of the American Farm Bureau Federation. We're all kind of independent entities. And so when we have a policy position that we take, we have county farm bureaus that are organized in almost every county in the state of Nebraska. Those counties have annual meetings, and those members in those counties present resolutions. And then those resolutions move their way through to our state convention. And then if it's on federal policy, go to our national convention. And so we have a very deliberative process that takes some time. It takes a lot of debate, a lot of compromise working through, and so it takes us some time to get to a final resolution on a number of issues, and this is one of those. We had a couple resolutions that made its way through out of a couple counties and made it through one of the stops along the way in a policy forum that we have where we discuss these issues. The conversation that was had on these, we came out actually neutral on this bill. We did not oppose it. We did not support it in the legislature this year, mainly, again, because of the fact that our members in the policy discussion that we had back in October focused on some of the concerns that people had, mainly on the repair side. Understandably, the story that the last gentleman had is a good example. I think of the question that people that from our membership have raised is, number one, there's keeping those dealerships in their communities is important, and especially now given agriculture's current economic conditions, they are a little worried that removing the repair business or the reduction of that may lead to some problems maintaining some of those dealerships in their small communities, just because repairs are going to be probably the way that a lot of these dealerships are going to make money for the time being, just simply because folks aren't buying a lot of new equipment. And so that's one of the concerns that we had. This kind of breaks itself down into two issues here, I think, in a lot of things. Number one is the repair issue itself, is being able for farmers, for independent repair shops to have that diagnostic equipment. I don't think necessarily when we had our discussion, it wasn't something that folks had a lot of problems with there. The problem came in more so when it came to changes of software, and that's the second part of this, is the alteration of software. And that's where I think a lot of the conversation of our members also centered on is some concerns having that used tractor you would buy. Again, a lot of farmers are going to buy more used equipment here for the foreseeable future. And what happens, if someone makes a software change or some sort of change to that piece of equipment, what does that mean for me as a purchaser of that equipment down the road, if it's an alteration that I don't necessarily want to make? And so those are kind of the two issues that our members talked about. Ultimately, they decided not to move ahead with the policy resolution on this. We are continuing to talk about it here for the remainder of this year in our county annual meetings. I know members are talking about it. I believe there are some members of ours in the room today that are probably going to be presenting resolutions, as a lot of counties may, on this particular topic. We have also American Farm Bureau issue advisory committees, one focused in on technology that has taken a look at this issue and are moving through the process to possibly present a resolution on this topic as well. So, for the time being, we remain neutral on it, but that very well may change moving forward here as we work through our policy development process.
Wonderful. That's a great perspective. Thanks, Jordan. And I think I will. So the two questions that you raised, I'd like to address. I'll have the panel and Lincoln address the first question about dealers. On your second question about software, I'm actually a software engineer. That's kind of my trade. I built the website iFixit, so I spend all my time in the code. So I can share a little bit of what some of the challenges with getting software. If you have a secondhand machine that you've bought, what are the issues? How do you make sure that you can verify what those changes, make sure that it's running safe? There's two things that you can do. One is you can actually run what's called a checksum, and you can verify that whether the software that's on the device has been modified or not. And so if we had these diagnostic tools from the manufacturer, that's one thing that we'd be able to do, is see if it's the original software or not. The other thing is, even if it is or not, it doesn't matter. You can always take the firmware and load the original factory firmware onto the machine if you have it. And that's one of the nice things that this bill would do, is it would make that firmware available. So then you could buy a machine, and just for peace of mind, you could take the original factory software, load it on there, and then it wouldn't matter what modifications were on there, because you're bringing it back to factory default. That's something we can't necessarily do now because we don't have the firmware. But if this resolution passed, I think we'd be able to, and I think it would bring some peace of mind into the aftermarket. So with that, let's go back to Lincoln, and who's up next?
Hello, I'm John Hanson, and I'm the president of Nebraska Farmers Union. I'm also the treasurer of National Farmers Union. And so welcome, everyone. And we want to thank Senator Johnson for helping host this event today. And the Agriculture Committee, I know, will be spending more time on LR 598. And as Senator Johnson indicated, in Nebraska, part of the beauty of our legislative structure and our system here is that all bills get hearings. And so all of the bills, whether they make it to the floor or get passed or not, get hearings. And we had a good hearing on April 20th. We had 7 testifiers in support. We had 5 that were opposed. And a good discussion was had, I thought, on the subject. And so Nebraska Farmers Union testified in support of LB 1072. From our perspective, we work on competition issues at the state and the national level all the time, because competition is where we get price discovery. It's where we get value allocation. Competition is what makes our system of economics better. And so when you take competition out of the equation, there's almost always a reduction in choice, a reduction in quality, and an increase in cost to the consumer. And in this case, we're the consumers. So as we looked at this issue, we said, how is this different than the automotive industry, or how is this different than the trucking industry? Similar technologies, similar questions. And in the case of the automotive industry and the truck industry, those industries have already agreed to make the technology available to independent mechanics, so that those shops can look at our vehicles. And I would report to you today that my Chevy Impala is in 6-to-6 Auto. It is not the Chevy dealer here in Lincoln, but they're an excellent independent repair business, and they have done an excellent job of taking care of my vehicles for a long time. And so there's no warranty issues, there's no reduction in quality. These are all licensed and competent and skilled mechanics. The question is, who has access to the technology to be able to do the diagnosis of what's wrong? And once you get through that part of the question and you've diagnosed what the issue is, then remedy it. And so this is, in our view, a fairness issue, that the folks in agriculture shouldn't be singled out and treated differently as an industry than the automotive customers or truck customers. And so we have a lot of good, high-quality, independent mechanic shops. We have a lot of farmers that are excellent mechanics themselves, and a lot of them work for dealers and got their start in farming by doing either full-time or part-time work as mechanics. My brother, for example, who farms our ground right now, started out as a mechanic, worked his way up as the head mechanic at a tractor dealership, and then finally opened up his own repair business, and now kind of has that kind of on the back shelf as he farms. But when you look at our farm shop, is an amazing shop. It's got all the toys and got all the tools, and for those of us who like to work on iron, good grief. My brother and my nephew, both licensed automotive diesel mechanics, both having the skills to do it. The question is, do folks like that have the access to the technology to diagnose the problem and treat it? And in our view, there's a lot of issues to think about in all of this, a lot of legal issues, but at the end of the day, are we more or less well served by the idea that in the case of agriculture, we do things differently than we do it for automotive and for the trucking industry? And so I understand the business of buying a dealership and a franchise, but you should not be able to buy a monopoly. And so this is really a monopoly and a competition issue. And you should not be able to buy a monopoly. And the monopoly on the service is, we think, over the line. So at the National Farmers Union Convention, Ben Gottshall was one of our delegates this last convention, and several of our other members were able to bring this issue to the National Convention. So here's what our national organization says. National Farmers Union supports fair repair and right to repair legislation that would allow farmers and independent mechanics access to diagnostic software, information, and other tools in order to repair modern equipment. So that is our national policy. That's what we work on at the national level. It's what we work on at the state level. And we also go a bit further in that we also got a section adopted that deals with first sale doctrine. And that says, it's fairly short, quote, NFU supports the first sale doctrine. This measure provides that an individual who knowingly purchases a copyrighted work from the copyright holder receives the right to sell, display, or otherwise dispose of that particular copy. NFU believes the purchasers should be provided protections that would not otherwise be available for licensees, end quote. So we want to be good partners with the folks who sell us farm equipment. They are our partners. On this particular issue, we're in disagreement, but it's our job as a farm organization to represent the first and the primary interests of farmers, and we think that this kinds of legislation is an important part of the service network, the competition, the quality and availability of service, and you know, the first speaker really hit the nail on the head. When it's planting time and you're down in the field, 3 days is a lifetime. And you know, you've got everything set up in your tractor, you've got all the stuff tied in, you just don't unhook the planter and put in another tractor, because everything you've done and all the prep you've done is for that particular unit to work in that particular way, and you can't just, you know, switch out and put in another tractor. You've got to fix that tractor. And so, if at all possible. So time is money. And so this is not only a money, but also a fairness and a competition issue. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, John. Really appreciate the perspective, and we appreciate the support of the Farmers Union, both in Nebraska and nationally. It's been really, really nice having your support. Are we going to Ben next? Is Ben up on deck? I'll let you pass the mic off to him. One of the things that has come up is this question of, well, what's the definition of farm equipment, or what's the scope that this legislative activity should cover? And I'm coming at this from iFixit, where we're interested in helping people repair everything from cell phones to farm equipment. And it turns out it's really, really hard to create narrow definitions of equipment, because you could say, well, it applies to tractors, but what about the implements where they now are adding electronics on there? Or what if you want to be able to modify an implement from one manufacturer to be able to work with another manufacturer's tractor? So there's a lot of subtleties, and so that's part of why the bill as it's currently written is relatively broad, is because there's just such a broad variety of electronics that are being used in farms today. So Ben, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you, and glad to be here. My name is Ben Gottshall, and I am a dairy farmer here in Lancaster County. I also work with Bolden, Nebraska on a very part-time basis as their agriculture and local food director. Bolden, Nebraska is a nonprofit grassroots political activism group. Our most significant issue in the past has been working to stop the Keystone XL pipeline from being built. Now, due to just feedback from our supporters, feedback from our members, we are continuing to work on some core issues that we identified in that campaign, which are abuse of corporate power, corporate control in our economy, property rights issues, and really just leveling the playing field for small independent businesses, in particular farmers and ranchers. And so we supported LB 1072, which was written by my local state senator, Ken Haar, who represents the district that I live in. We supported that for those reasons. We believe that a monopoly or monopolization of an industry is unfair, and it's bad for our economy, and it's bad for small businesses and farmers and ranchers. We would like to see, we see this bill as also being an economic development bill, whereby independent mechanics and farmers and ranchers can repair their own equipment, can start their own businesses. And in rural areas in Nebraska, where we see a lot of population decline, we see this type of opportunity as a way to bring young people back into small towns and rural communities. And that's a very important thing for our state's economy and for our state's number one industry, which is agriculture. And so we are going to pay attention to the and we're happy to be standing side by side with the other organizations that are also working on this issue and supporting the farmers and ranchers.
Thank you, Ben. Have you had any repair challenges on your farm? Things that you wish that you were able to fix yourself that you've had trouble with?
I have not. My farm equipment repair experience comes from growing up where we lived about 25 miles from the nearest town. And back then, we were using what probably are considered to be antique tractors today. We could fix most of what we needed to ourselves, and we did, and that was really how we got by, because when you're that far from the nearest town in the middle of hay season and you're baling hay and you have something go down, you've got to be able to fix it yourself. And you can rely on a dealer or a technician or a service person to come help you if you need it. But we just geographically, it made no sense for us to not be able to repair that equipment. And so we've actually consciously avoided purchasing newer equipment on our operation because we believe that we need to retain the ability to repair our own equipment. And we'd like to upgrade someday, but right now we just think it makes economic sense and practical sense not to do so.
Well, we've definitely seen that the valuation of some older equipment, it tends to maintain its value better than the new equipment sometimes because of buyers like you. So that makes a lot of sense. I would love to, so I want to take a bit of a turn and pass things over to Jason. So if Jason could grab the mic. Jason is in a completely different industry than the rest of you, but I think just as critical to our operations. Jason runs iFixOmaha and has been instrumental in putting this whole thing together. So the fact that all of the AV is working is thanks to Jason. He's been working really hard the last few days to set it up. And Jason has a really impressive operation. So Jason, take it away. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to say thanks to Kevin Kinney, who is actually providing the internet connection that we're using today. So if it's a success, we should thank Kevin for sure. So yeah, I'm the owner of iFixOmaha. We're based obviously out of Omaha, and this is an alliance between ag and technology and consumer electronic repair shops like mine. And so I thought maybe I would just start off by saying, do you know that over the past several years we've saved thousands and thousands of people time and money? And you think, yeah, we're fixing lots of iPhones coming through our door, but guess what? Our biggest client actually is an ag company. We actually repair their tablets that are out in the field, and we keep that operation going where they can stay connected and run their business in the field. Our other clients, our biggest accounts actually, are state and local municipalities. We have the public school districts. We repair, for instance, there's a local school district that has an aging fleet of iPad 2s, and all these iPad 2s are failing in the same way, all at the same time. And this is a district that does not have the funds available right now to upgrade and spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars on a new fleet of iPads for their students. So we've stepped in and we have saved them a tremendous amount of money by keeping that fleet of iPads running for their students. We actually save the state, the local, the city government, the schools, and agriculture tons of money, not to mention our retail customers that we actually offer a wide variety of repairs for all consumer electronics. Essentially anything with a chip in it these days is something that my highly trained technicians can repair. They can fix anything you throw at them as long as they have the right tool for the job. And something that we're talking about today is the fact that there are some critical tools for the job that we are still missing. And these are tools that are available. They're out. They're created, but we can't get our hands on them because they're locked down by the manufacturers. Things like simple things like parts, replacement parts. We have to reach across the globe to find vendors and distributors that have access to these parts. Oh, and by the way, we have construction going on in Lincoln. I don't know if you hear that. I promise you that's not me. Oh, Lord, that's not me. Just 1 second as that drill finishes.
So, Jason, I'm curious, how many of your technicians are certified by Apple?
Well, that's a great question. 0. And you may ask, well, why not? That would solve all your problems, wouldn't it? And that is a very incorrect assumption. I've actually been on the phone with Apple several times inquiring about becoming an authorized Apple service provider. And first of all, they make it very clear that they view what we do, quote unquote, fraudulent activity. The manufacturer, Apple, says that what we are doing is fraudulent. That is their first starting point. But then from there, if we can just get across that line, is that they say, well, if you do want to go down the line of becoming authorized, you no longer can repair any other manufacturer. You can only repair Apple in your place of business. But then it gets even worse. They tell me that, guess what? You're not going to do any repairs in your place of business. You're going to send those devices to us. You are authorized to send customers devices that are broken, for instance, an iPhone, to California or wherever their service center is. They will fix it, and we will get it back in 2 weeks, and then the customer will have their phone. And we know how ridiculous that is. We would have to close our doors. Folks need their phones immediately. They don't have 2 weeks to wait. the bigger point here is that they limit the work that we can do. So if someone comes in with a broken iPad screen, we are not permitted to even open that device. They make that specifically clear that we cannot lay our hands on that device in any way. We can't service it. We have to send it back. And so you may ask, why would you be an authorized service provider when essentially you just become a post office for Apple? You just take devices in and send it away. Well, our customers need those devices fixed quickly, and that's what we do right now. We do it for a fraction of the cost.
Right. And the challenge that we've seen is that as you have these independent folks, they end up being reliant on an ecosystem that develops. And if a crack enters the ecosystem, it can really shake up the local market. A few years ago, Nikon decided to stop selling service parts to all the independents, and most of the camera repair shops around the country went out of business. So this has been a real challenge we've seen across the board. The primary reason that independent Apple repair is still working is that there's been a part supply chain, and that there has been repair manuals and training information available online. So I actually wrote the repair manual for a lot of the iPhones. We make it available for free online because Apple refuses to share that repair information with independent technicians. So we've been doing a lot, on a few products to make sure that repair information is available. But as we're seeing more and more electronic products come out, you can't necessarily rely on the goodwill of the internet community. We have to get the manufacturers involved supporting independent repair.
Yes, absolutely. And it's getting a little scarier as we look to the future because we're seeing manufacturers like Apple, not only do they not make the parts readily available, like you just mentioned, but now what they're doing is they're digitally pairing or locking the original hardware to the original device it came on. For instance, an iPhone home button, which some of you already know this issue, an iPhone home button with the fingerprint scanner, you cannot replace that button with a new button. Let's say the button stops working. That happens all the time. The part goes out. If the customer brings that to us, we can no longer replace that button and have a functioning home button for that customer because the original button is locked digitally to that device. Only Apple at this time can go in and code that phone, open up the code, and actually relock or unlock that first piece of hardware. And that is very frightening because that alone, if that expands, that will destroy the entire industry that has sprung up from a true demand from consumers. This will not be in the best interest of consumers. Prices will skyrocket, choice will decrease, and let's be honest, Apple would prefer us just to buy a new phone when our phone breaks, and it's going to go across the entire industry. We're going to see it, anything with the chip, that is the future if we don't get legislation now protecting us.
Well, and I think we've seen that everybody likes to copy Apple. Where Apple goes, everybody else follows. And so if Apple locks down devices, it won't be too long before John Deere is involved in the same thing. It's interesting, if you look at the lobbyists who have engaged on this issue, the two companies who have been the most vocal have been Apple and John Deere. So they're in cahoots. It would be nice to be able to come up with some kind of discussion and compromise with them. And so I guess at this point I'd like to open the floor to questions. If there's any questions in the room there, maybe you can take the question and then repeat it for us. And if you want to direct your question at who you'd like to answer it, we have a great panel, great group of experts here. We'd love to answer any questions that you have about this bill or about the right to repair efforts that are going on nationally.
Yes. Hey, Gay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Copyright ruling in October of 15, and get your input and your thoughts on that, how that affects us.
Right, so he's asking about the Copyright Office ruling. So maybe I'll take that question because I was involved in applying for the exemption. So there are state level issues that we're working on, and there are federal level issues. At a federal level, there is a law that says that you're not supposed to tinker with electronics unless you have permission from the manufacturer. It's called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA. And they knew that this was a very, very broad law, and so they built an escape hatch into it where they said, okay, you can't tinker with anything without manufacturer permission unless you go to the Copyright Office and you lay out a legal case for exactly why you need to be able to do that. And so we applied for an exemption with we worked with the law clinic at University of Southern California. It took me about a year and a half and the equivalent of over $100,000 in legal time. to put this application together. And we said we want the ability to modify and repair cars, trucks, and farm equipment. And I had to go to DC and talk to the Copyright Office, and they had a big panel, and it took about a year of intensive effort to apply for this exemption. The Copyright Office released their ruling in October. And when you apply for these exemptions, you apply for a 3-year period, and then every 3 years you have to reapply. So on October 28th, they released their ruling, and they said, okay, we're going to give you an exemption to allow you to modify the software on tractors, but we're afraid of the EPA. And this is crazy, but they said that they're going to give the EPA a year to get ready for this change to happen. And so we were granted the exemption in October, but they said it won't take effect until this October. So as of October 28th, 2016, in several months, it will be legal to modify with the electronics on farm equipment for a period of 2 years from then. So we applied for a 3-year exemption, and they said, nah, we're going to give the EPA a year to get ready, and so you're only going to get 2 years. So in practical terms, what will you be able to do on October 28th? It means that if you're mucking around with the software on these things, or if you're making tools, that it's going to be harder for John Deere to sue you. Practically, you could do it now, but if John Deere finds out, they'd have legal standing to go after you. But it's not like there's the copyright police wandering around looking for people to modify their equipment. This is really a tool for manufacturers to shut down competition. So if you had a repair shop that was using doing software modifications now, there is a window for a manufacturer to come in and say, no, we don't want you to do that. And the penalties are very harsh. The penalties are up to $150,000 per infringement and up to 5 years in jail. So a lot of repair shops have just said we're not going to touch the firmware until after the October 28th time when this comes into effect. Was that a reasonable overview? And I have written extensively about this. I can post a link and share it around. I've written extensively in Wired magazine. John Deere didn't like what I had to say on Wired, and they actually sent a letter to all their dealers saying that I was lying about this. Absolutely not. We've got many intellectual property lawyers that are very solid. And what John Deere actually said is that when you buy a tractor, you're buying the hardware, but you just have an implied license to use the software. You don't actually own the software on the tractor. And I think that that's a real problem. We should own the entire piece of equipment, including the software on it. Jason, did that address the question? Is there a follow-up, or does anybody have more concerns about kind of the federal copyright situation?
Yeah, we do have a follow-up.
My name is Kevin. I have a question to follow up. So we have permission from the federal government to change software as of October 2016. Why would it be illegal to have an aftermarket software repair system made available? And would that be an infringement of copyright? That's my question.
Sure. Good question. Yeah, so unfortunately, the Copyright Office granted the narrowest possible exemptions. So they said that it's legal for you to modify the software on your own equipment, but not necessarily for a third party to do it for you, or to develop tools that do it and sell them. So that's kind of the next phase of this, and this is really why this underlying law is just a real problem, and we're trying very hard to overcome it. This is an area where folks like the Farm Bureau could really help us out. We're having a meeting with folks in DC, and what we're trying to do is get a permanent across-the-board repair exemption that would make it legal to modify software if you were if you're repairing or modifying a device, and to be able to make and sell tools, because the tools really is the challenge. It's not like an individual farmer is going to sit down and hook up his laptop and start writing code and decompiling the John Deere firmware. You're going to have a few folks that are going to hire engineers and spend a lot of time developing a tool and then sell it. And if there's any legal concern that they could be attacked for doing that, they're not going to invest the money up front. And so this is an area where we really need to get these national groups involved. The bill that we're talking about in Nebraska would not solve this issue. There's kind of two differences. The bill that's being considered would say, John Deere, make your existing diagnostic tools available for sale. What the federal bill does is says it's illegal to make your own diagnostic tools, and that's really the long-term fix. So What we got in terms of an exemption is relatively narrow. It allows you to do things to your own equipment that you've developed yourself, but it's going to make it hard to do what you're suggesting, which is to design a repair diagnostic system and sell it. I'm sorry, I tried. We didn't get as much freedom as we were hoping for.
Anything else?
What can farmers do to help impact this process? That's a question here.
So what can farmers do? I might pass that question over to Jordan. Jordan, what kind of areas would you like to see farmers more engaged in?
So first and foremost, the thing with Farm Bureau is that in order for us to take any position on any of this, we need to have policy direction from our members to do so. And so, the meetings that Kyle has had with American Farm Bureau in D.C. and the conversations that I've had with both Gay and Kyle and all that, those are good and help setting some groundwork up. But first and foremost, if our members want Farm Bureau to take a position on something, we need to actually have policy that supports the concept. And so that would be the first thing, again, from our perspective of what we would need. The second thing is always and I'll talk generally, and I think John and Ben would probably agree with this. And with any organization, you need to then have engagement following the position that's taken. And so it's the matter of talking to state senators. It's the grassroots lobbying networks that we participate in, and making those phone calls, setting those meetings out, and just listing support. But again, I'll go back from our perspective. The reason we have not weighed in, the reason we have remained neutral on this, is we simply just don't have policy on it. And so that would be, again, from our perspective, what we would need in order for Farm Bureau to make a decision one way or another, for us to come down on one side of this or another. We would need to have this be a part of our policy development process.
And part of the challenge here is just that this is a new issue and it's technical. And so if you go to, the folks who are running, Farm Bureau in Utah, and you say, what do you know about electronics and farm equipment? Like, they know some, but they don't know the legal barriers and the challenges. And so there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And I think that's something that all of you can get involved with, is start talking to your local policy committees, and let's get this education process rolling. I know that Farm Bureau at a national level has been putting together a paper with kind of a really solid overview of everything that's going on. And that kind of educational work is important, because we need to let everybody on all of these policy committees know, and then kind of let the knowledge trickle up. And I think once people are fully informed, it's a pretty straightforward decision. But there's a lot of education that needs to happen before we get there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Kyle, there's a lot of pieces here. And so again, when we're looking at this, it's I'd almost maybe disagree with you. I don't know if it's as cut and dry, just because there's so many different issues here. We can talk about having diagnostic equipment available, and that's probably an easier conversation versus copyright law and the alteration of software and some of those things. That maybe is different from our perspective than others, but that's what makes it maybe more complicated, is there are some technical things in here that we as a staff have tried to educate our members about. But I will say that our members, given the advent of new farm technology and a lot of members of ours being on the cutting edge of that, wanting to be involved in purchasing new farm equipment and so on and so forth, they've come to understand these issues. And so, trying to make sure we're continuing in that education process, we've done that. But I think there's a lot of folks that understand this issue, a lot of farmers maybe more so even than we sometimes give them credit for on this one.
Okay, great. So I have a question for John, if we can get John back up on the mic. I would love to know, I heard a little bit of what you were talking about, and one of the objections that we've heard regularly as well, if the farmers or if the independents can do it, that's going to harm the dealers, and if we don't have our local dealer, we're really up a creek. So what do you think about the competition argument that it might harm and run some of these local dealers out of business if there's competition?
Well, the issue of competition is a matter of applying it across the board and balance. And you should not employ the use of a monopoly in order to be able to backstop your other financial considerations, because there's a plus and a minus to every single thing that we do on a policy issue. And so there's pluses and there's minuses. We want our dealers to survive. We want them to be strong. We want them to be able to compete. We want them to provide services to us. And, we have seen an awful lot of really good dealers, lose footing in rural communities. We see a lot of consolidation of dealerships. And so, the companies have helped kind of contribute to the issue themselves by virtue of the fact that they have supported a policy of consolidation of dealerships. And so now you're seeing dealerships in a lot fewer communities already. And so then that creates the problem of access and service and availability to service and all of those things. So from our perspective, which is the perspective of the farmers, at the end of the day, they need to be able to buy products, and they also need to be able to have them repaired and serviced. And so the repair and the service part becomes more difficult as dealers get farther and farther away. So from a structural standpoint, we think that the overall interests of agriculture are best served by having more competition. And you also provide more opportunities for farmers and ranchers in more communities to be able to avail themselves of these kinds of services, because you can set up a good repair shop in a rural community or even a farmstead. And so those kinds of things can be available. But at the end of the day, I always used to say when we were planting corn, if your wheels aren't turning, you aren't moving. And so when you're down, you are in trouble. And so your time is worth a lot of money. And as folks are farming large amounts of ground and trying to cover more acres, then the need to have cost-effective and accessible service is an important thing. And so, we all have to be able to work together, but at the end of the day, it all begins and ends with the economic viability of the customer. And farmers and ranchers are the customers. And so what is in the best interest of the customers overall, and how do we make sure that they're around to do business another year? Because when we lose our customers, and I used to not only be a good-sized farmer myself, but used to be in the ag supply business, when you lose your customers, you're going out of business. And so the more farmers we have, the better it is for all of the dealers. It is for the rural communities. It's the better for all of us. And Ben Gottshall's point about economic development, these smaller kind of in-between independent repair farm equipment places they fill a niche, they fill a need, we can make this more or less complicated, but at the end of the day, what has been the example that we look to of a comparable situation with comparable technology, with a lot of comparable issues, and that is, what about the automotive and the truck industry? Is there some major problem there that we're not aware of? The system that's there, the system that we would prefer to have for tractor equipment, seems to be working quite well. And consumers are getting good service. There's not warranty issues. We have more competition. It's better for consumers overall. And so I think that's the model that we look at relative to this issue.
I think that's very well put. And the legislation that we're working on is all very closely modeled on existing automotive policies. So I think it's a relatively conservative approach at saying, let's just do what we've done in the automotive sector elsewhere. Does anyone else have any kind of final words that they want to say? We're running up against the hour, and I don't want to keep people longer than we promised. But if somebody has final closing comments, take it away.
I was just going to add to what John was saying. As Abilene Machine, we service, he's talking about these dealers. We service a tremendous amount of them. As a matter of fact, that's probably more than half of our business is independent repair shops. And so to that extent, he talks about being able to have more customers. Well, in 10 to 15 years, I could see to where we can't even have those customers anymore, which is really a huge disservice to the industry as a whole, in the sense of just exactly what he says. Competition lowers prices. It creates better quality of work. Competition is never a bad deal. That's why we have a free market economy in America. That's why we thought it works. Just a second.
We've got the drill going again. All right.
We got a drill going on here.
Whether they fix
I call it a fire drill, but we're not up. But I just wanted to add one last part, and this is for anybody, especially in the state of Nebraska. This is, in my opinion, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for the state of Nebraska. I think it's this is innovation in the making. This is creating a fair market. This is creating a free market. And I think for the state of Nebraska to take this on and hopefully maybe pass this would be I don't see how that would look bad for them. I think that would make the state of Nebraska look like a very equal state, a very progressive state almost, in the sense that they're taking the time to think about software and consumer needs that go into the future. This is the future. Software is the future. Firmware is the future. And you wouldn't think the state of Nebraska would lead that or spearhead that, but I think this is an opportunity where they can. This is where they can really shine and look like a really fair state that understands the needs of people, everyday people, especially farmers, who I believe are probably the backbone of this economy, just like they are in Kansas. So I'd like to say it's a tremendous opportunity for them, and I appreciate them doing this. And thank you to Senator Johnson.
Senator, we'd love to hear from you on where you'd like to see this conversation go over the next year. Obviously, these issues aren't going away, and we're looking forward to continued dialogue. So where do you see over the next 6 months to year this conversation moving?
Well, to go back a little bit to my opening comments, and I didn't probably explain all of the process in Nebraska, as John Hanson has stated. Every bill that's introduced gets a hearing because we are a unicameral. We have one committee. We have one ag committee. We have one education committee and the like. So, the hearing process is where it comes in, and it's in the second house. So it's important for the bill to be written properly if there's going to be a bill. The bill at 1072 was referenced to the Judiciary Committee, so it did not go to a committee, which we thought it might. It went to the Judiciary Committee, and from the legal standpoint and the copyright and those types of things is why it was issued there, or referenced there. Another committee that it could have been referenced to, in Nebraska at least, is Transportation and Telecommunication, which deals with technology type of things, and it could have been referenced there. It could have been referenced by our executive board to the Ag Committee. We, as chair of the Ag Committee, we thought it might be referenced to my committee, but it wasn't, so we did not hear the bill. One of the things probably that would maybe allow it to move forward a little better would be if it was written and emphasized the ag side of it, so that it might be referenced to possibly referenced to the Ag Committee, or at least requested to be there. So it's kind of, in our process, it's kind of how is the bill written, and to what committee is it referenced? So I think that's the groundwork that would have to go into a bill to make sure, at least in Nebraska, that it probably gets heard maybe to more ag-oriented type senators, that probably have a closer interest to agriculture than what maybe some other committee might have. So that's part of the process. It's going to take, I'm sure, a lot of groundwork, grassroots, in order to get senators engaged in this. The Ag Committee will be different in the Nebraska legislature next year. We are in an election year this year. We have 2 members, I believe, on the Ag Committee that are term limited out. I'm up for re-election. There's might be one other on the committee that's up for re-election. So we could have a different committee structure next year. There could be a new committee chair. I might not be re-elected. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. So it's important probably in this process in Nebraska, at least, after the general election in November, at least we'll know who the new senators are that are elected or re-elected. And then we don't know until the first day of session who's going to be on what committees and who's going to be chairs. So you have to be up to speed at the right time, at least in Nebraska. And then it'll be referenced to a committee. And then once it's referenced to that committee, the committee chair and legal counsel from that committee will schedule a hearing, and it's publicized. And that's when the grassroots would need to come in and talk to the issue.
How can citizens get involved that want to support this? We've got a lot of folks watching from the internet and farmers around the state. How can we get involved and help?
You can go to the Nebraska, if we're talking about Nebraska legislation, go to the website, nebraskalegislature.com, and you will be able to find out all of the senators and be able to go find out what senators are on different committees. You've got their phone number, their email addresses, and you would be able to make contact directly with the senator staff at least. We are not in session right now, so that information would go to the senator's staff, and sometimes it gets kind of overlooked until we get into session. So, but it's just, you got to make contact with the different senators. There's 49 senators in Nebraska total. We do not have a second house, so we're all state senators. So just be persistent as you try and contact senators throughout the state of Nebraska.
Oh no, we lost him. Okay, well I think that's wrapping things up. I think they're on the hot spots. It was really wonderful to be able to have a breadth of perspective on this issue. Clearly, you can see that there's a lot of interest, and we have a lot of expertise all the way through from folks who are working on the repairs themselves, and this is both with small electronics devices all the way to ag equipment, and then there's a lot of policymakers involved. In order to really raise this to the next level, we're just going to have to be active. We need to have as many conversations between now and the next session with legislators as possible, and figure out the best path forward. But we raised a lot of awareness. There's a lot more interest in this issue across Nebraska and across the country now than there was just a year ago. And if we keep on the same trajectory, I'm very optimistic we're going to get something done in the next year or two. With that, I think we'll wrap things up. We will be posting a summary video of this online on YouTube. Let's see if Jason is joining back in. I think there we go. Hi, Jason. So we're wrapping up. Are you guys kind of wrapping up in there?
Well, we have about 20 people that want to talk still. I'm kidding. No, we're good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we'll let you guys kind of have your discussion internally, and we'll wrap this up and post the video on YouTube. Thanks a lot for making this happen.
Thank you. Thanks for your leadership.
All right, cheers, everybody.